is a lecture from Ms. Dara Tatray and a few words introducing herself. Dr. Dara Tatray has been a member of the Theosophical Society since 1979 and has been a frequent visitor to Adyar, acting as superintendent of Lerbita chambers of approximately 18 months in the 80s. She holds a PhD in the history and philosophy of science, awarded by the University of New South Wales in 2006 for her thesis, Rebuilding the Foundations of Deep Ecology, a non-dualist approach. She is currently National President of the Australian section. The title of her lecture today, The Scientific Basis of The title of her lecture, The Scientific Basis of Universal Brotherhood. Let's listen her words.
Buongiorno. Köszönöm szépen. Dear President, dear Antonio, and friends near and far. Exploring the nature of unity and the nature of undivided consciousness is perhaps an urgent matter in a heavily armed world torn apart by entrenched views, self-interest and ignorance of other races, religions, and ways of life. In itself, this exploration may be a great source of wisdom, helping us to live in harmony with nature and with each other. For such an inquiry necessarily takes one into the nature of non-local or undivided consciousness, which reveals the oneness of life in no uncertain terms. As the Nobel physicist Erwin Schrödinger pointed out in his book, What is Life? Consciousness is a singular for which there is no plural. Consciousness is a singular for which there is no plural. If we wish to live in harmony and cultivate harmony among the religious, spiritual, and other traditions of the world, without which harmony it is unlikely that there will be any peace on earth, it would be helpful if more of us understood that universal brotherhood is not just an ideal towards which we might strive. It is the truth about reality at both a spiritual and a physical level. Universal brotherhood as a fact in nature is a statement that refers to our physical and spiritual oneness and to our shared origins and shared identity in the Atman, or universal self, which permeates all of matter and all of nature as the source of our lives and the final goal of all our endeavors. Though this level or quality of consciousness is barely even glimpsed in our general awareness, it is the ultimate rationale to the brotherhood of mankind, with the potential to genuinely heal cultural, religious, and social rifts. If each one of us is literally made of the same stuff, then there really is no other. The physicist David Bohm once remarked that the truth about reality is wholeness, undivided wholeness. If we are fragmented, we must blame it on ourselves. The truth about reality is undivided wholeness. If we are fragmented, we must blame it on ourselves and not on the nature of reality. It is highly appropriate that in the Theosophical Society, great stress is laid on brotherhood, and that the first object is regarded as fundamental to the other two. Certainly, the care for others, implicit in a feeling of brotherhood, provides something of a safety measure in any exploration of the powers latent in the human being. Without selflessness, compassion, or brotherhood as a foundation, the development of latent powers is fraught with pitfalls. However, I would like to suggest that although it may not be obvious, the first object is dependent upon the third object for its actualization or realization. This is because if universal brotherhood is to be something other than a utopian ideal, there must be a solid foundation for it in fact, and not just in myth or legend. It has to be more than just a matter of a number of theosophists thinking it is important or worthy. Rather, must it be shown to derive from the facts of life, from the radical unity of the ultimate essence of all constituent parts of nature, which unity links everything together as surely as if it were all one organism or one being. This, I believe, is the only sure foundation for the brotherhood of humanity, indeed, the brotherhood of all of life, and not just of our own species. So while it is quite right to emphasize the first object, it should perhaps be not overemphasized at the expense of the others. We often hear it said that Madame Blavatsky equated theosophy with altruism. Indeed, she did in a number of passages, but she devoted the vast majority of her writing to the furtherance of the third object, and to a lesser extent the second. Now, this is not a competition for which is the most important object. I wish only to commend to our attention the importance of backing up the proposition that brotherhood is a fact in nature, with facts and not just fancy. For it has to be admitted that even within the ranks of the Theosophical Society, brotherhood at present is more like an idle dream than a reality. H.P. Blavatsky and her teachers pointed out that there is only one consciousness in existence, expressing itself in multifarious forms, and that everything is made of the same substance, which the philosopher Spinoza called God or nature, interchangeably so. What is God or nature. In the Secret Doctrine and in the Mahatma Letters, this substance is sometimes referred to as spirit matter. Similarly, in Cause, Principle, and Unity, Giordano Bruno argued that there is only one being in existence, having all the various forms of nature as its experience. There is only one being in existence, having all of us and the entire manifested universe as its experience. According to Bruno, all the differences that we see are merely the varying face of the same substance. All the differences that we see are the varying face of the same substance. As one Bruno interpreter put it, every creation is an alteration, the substance remaining always the same. Every creation is an alteration to the one substance, which always remains the same. This seems to me to be universal brotherhood writ large, not only with every race, creed, caste, religion, and sex really being a different aspect of the one, but with every single thing, every mineral, every star, every element in existence being an alteration of the one. The same idea is expressed in the Emerald Tablet, attributed to Hermes Trismegistus. It begins with what is now a rather well-known idea. That which is below is like that which is above, and that which is above is like that which is below, to do the miracles of one only thing. Everything that exists, whether high or low, be it spirit or matter, is each doing the miracles of the one only thing. This one, this being, is essentially without form, but it enters into every form in nature. As it says in the Katha Upanishad, as fire which is one, entering the world, becomes varied in shape according to the object it burns, so also this one self within all beings becomes varied according to whatever it enters, and also exists outside of them all. I'll read it again. As fire which is one, entering this world, becomes varied in shape according to the object it burns, so also the one self within all beings becomes varied according to whatever it enters, and also exists outside of them all. No doubt sometimes some of us feel burned by this one self as we experience the highs and lows of life, but that is another matter. In any case, it is of no small significance that key findings in modern science support the proposition that the ultimate essence of every part of nature is one undivided consciousness, present alike in all. Science has now revealed what the ancient wisdom has long affirmed, that an undivided reality lies at the heart of matter, subsuming the world of appearances. Unity may seem like an abstraction, but philosophers, mystics, and scientists have argued that there is a unity to this world that is far more deeply real than the diversity that is readily apparent. There is no denying the diversity that we see all around us, but there is a unity to the world that is more deeply real. It contains more of reality in it than does the diversity. Whilst science will never be able to seize on that which is truly universal, truly infinite, like thought, it can point towards it and highlight its significance. And that is what is currently taking place at the cutting edge of science. In very simple terms, the whole thing may be expressed as follows. Borrowing from the work of William A. Tiller, we might say that for the past 100 years or so, science has viewed the world largely through the lens of a fairly simple reaction equation. Mass equals energy, with each quality being convertible to the other via the well-known but perhaps little understood relationship E equals mc squared. That is the lens through which science has been viewing reality for at least the last 100 years, that mass equals energy, with each quality being convertible to the other. However, now this view of nature is giving way to a new reaction equation, namely mass equals energy equals consciousness, with each unique quality being somehow convertible one to the other. In Science and the Reenchantment of the Cosmos, Erwin Laszlo argues that current findings in physics, cosmology, biology, and consciousness research indicate the presence of a hitherto unrecognized field in which instant or quasi-instant connections between organisms and their environment and within each organism routinely take place. So science itself has come upon a new field in which instant or almost instant connections between things near and far routinely take place. As Laszlo put it, recent findings suggest that there is more to the universe than matter and energy, space and time. There is also an element that connects and correlates. This element is as much a part of the universe as the electromagnetic, the gravitational, and the nuclear fields. It too is a field that is as fundamental as electromagnetism and gravitation. This field, which Laszlo has called the Akashic field, for reasons which I don't have the time to go into now, or to make it sound more scientific, sometimes he calls it the A field, not to bring Sanskrit or Hindu metaphysics into it. But this field appears to be of the nature of consciousness, and it tells us a great deal about the qualities of consciousness. There is now a sound scientific basis for universality, non-duality, and the transcendence and selflessness which is the way to it. There is now a sound scientific basis for unity, non-locality, and the transcendence and selflessness which is the way to it. It seems that the real basis of universal brotherhood is in fact a universal element, the Atman, the universal self, and a universal state, which we might call the integrated state of consciousness. It is this element, the universal self, and this state, the integrated state of consciousness, which is what is universally present, alike in all. And science appears to be pointing to them both, often unwillingly. And the qualities of both the Atman and the integrated state are very clearly reflected in the Akashic field, this new field of which Laszlo has written. The implications of this for the Theosophical Society are probably obvious, but I would like to summarize them with reference to one of my favorite quotations from the physicist David Bohm, who once made this remark: "If we accept the idea of the explicate order of everything outside of everything else, the manifest world, if we accept the idea of the explicate order in which everything is outside of everything else, as we plainly see in this room today, then it becomes absurd to think of human beings all becoming one. It is physically, literally impossible. But now we say that this earlier view was a tremendous abstraction, and that by following science itself, we have been led to a view which is compatible with the wholeness of mankind or its holiness, which are in this sense interchangeable terms, incidentally, wholeness and holiness, but we needn't go into that now. But according to this great physicist, science itself has now led to a view in which the wholeness of mankind or its holiness is routinely possible and a sensible ideal according to the nature of reality. Physicists around the world have been demonstrating the existence of non-local consciousness for quite some time now. That is, a form of consciousness not bound by space and time and present alike in all. This study of modern science has not necessarily brought any of the scientists closer to this state or this element themselves, but at least it gives a strong theoretic underpinning to similar propositions made in the distant past by sages in the East and in the West. Let us now change tack slightly and have a look at what a number of theosophists have said on the matter, or how they might address the ills of our time, with what philosophy or view of reality they might address the ills of our time, particularly those exacerbated, if not caused by, religion. In brief, and this is indeed very brief, some of the key ideas are as follows. First, as already mentioned by Professor Krishna in his talk the other day, in The Key to Theosophy, Madame Blavatsky proposed that theosophy is not religion, it is religion itself. Not too easy to understand what is meant by religion itself, so let's set it aside for this morning. Nevertheless, in The Key to Theosophy, H.P. Blavatsky suggested that theosophy is not a religion, it is religion itself. Now, the idea that religion itself might stand over and above any and every religion would help all concerned to treat each religion as an equal but different expression of the impulse to transcendence, completion, and wholeness, which seems to be common to all of mankind. The idea that religion itself stands over and above any and every religion would, if truly understood, truly believed, truly adopted, help everyone concerned to treat each religion as an equal but different expression of the urge to completion and transcendence. Second, universal brotherhood as a fact in nature. This provides the essential rationale for living in harmony with all of life, encompassing as it does not only the human being, but all of existence. And finally, perhaps most difficult of all for us to understand, the existence of immutable law, which was stressed over and over again in certain key theosophical texts, such as the Mahatma Letters and the Secret Doctrine. The existence of immutable law as the substratum of all the things and lives and minds that make up the tangible world takes all the arbitrariness out of existence and removes the need for an external creator and an external authority. in the face of the existence of immutable law, there is no need for an external authority, an external guide, or an external prison warden. In the works of H.P. Blavatsky and in the Mahatma letters, immutable law replaces God. Universal brotherhood is the foundation of all ethics, and the law of karma replaces divine retribution, heaven and hell. The basic argument against God and in favor of law is summarized in the Mahatma letters as follows. It is a lengthy passage, but I think it is worth reading and considering rather carefully, if not now, then later. There are some modern philosophers who would prove the existence of a creator from motion. That is to say, because something is, there must have been a creator. However, they continue, we say and affirm that that motion, the universal perpetual motion which never ceases, never slackens, nor increases its speed, not even during the interludes between the pralayas or nights of Brahma, in other words, not even when nothing is in manifestation. This universal perpetual motion which never ceases, never slackens, nor increases its speed, not even during the interludes between the pralayas or nights of Brahma, but goes on like a mill set in motion, whether it has anything to grind or not. For the pralaya means the temporary loss of every form, but by no means the destruction of cosmic matter, which is eternal. We say that this perpetual motion is the one eternal and uncreated deity we are able to recognize. This perpetual motion is the only eternal and uncreated deity we are able to recognize. We say that it is motion that governs the laws of nature, and that it governs them as the mechanical impulse given to running water. So this motion governs the laws of nature, just like the mechanical impulse given to running water, which will propel them either in a direct line or along hundreds of side furrows that they may happen to meet on their way. And whether those furrows are natural grooves or man-made channels, the water simply flows according to natural law. And we maintain that wherever there is life and being, and in however much spiritualized a form, there is no room for moral government, much less for a moral governor, which of course does not mean there's no room for morality. There's just no room for a watchdog. We maintain that wherever there is life and being, and in however spiritualized a form, there is no room for moral government, much less for a moral governor. We believe in matter alone, in matter as visible nature and matter in its invisibility, as the invisible, omnipresent, omnipotent Proteus with its unceasing motion which is its life. So this is a very different view of matter to the ordinary garden variety matter of modern Western science, because it includes visible nature as well as matter in its invisibility, which is this one substance that becomes everything. So please don't get upset that the authors of the Mahatma letters are saying there is nothing in existence but matter. There may well be nothing in existence but matter, but that matter is really spirit matter. In any case, they state quite categorically, we believe in matter alone, including the invisible, omnipresent, omnipotent Proteus with its unceasing motion which is its life, and which nature draws from herself, since she is the great whole outside of which nothing can exist. They conclude, the existence of matter is a fact, the existence of motion is another fact, their self-existence and eternity is a third fact. So matter, motion, and eternity are the three facts of life, according to the authors of this letter. And the idea of pure spirit as a being or an existence, give it whatever name you will, is a chimera, a gigantic absurdity. And yet, since time immemorial, human beings have been prepared to kill and die for this gigantic absurdity. They argue that everything, the authors of the Mahatma Letters and H.P. Blavatsky in The Secret Doctrine and elsewhere, argue that everything is the result of natural law, which is basically mechanical in nature. Nothing that one can appeal to emotionally. No exceptions can be made to the universal law of gravitation. No exceptions can be made to the universal law of karma. These things are immutable laws. Fundamentally, they argue that it all boils down to motion. But this movement, this absolute abstract motion, which is the beginning of everything, may be mechanical, but it is not devoid of spirit or soul. It is, in fact, the expression and manifestation of the absolute, and it appears to be of the nature of consciousness. This model of life, which in many respects is quite radical, in which every apparently separate entity is part of an integrated whole, readily gives rise to the following view of karma, once expressed by H.P. Blavatsky. All men have spiritually and physically the same origin. As mankind is essentially of one and the same essence, and that essence is infinite, uncreate, and eternal, whether we call it God or nature, nothing, therefore, can affect one nation or one man without affecting all other nations and all other men. Nothing can affect one nation or one man without affecting all other nations and all other men. We may not be aware of it, but that is the fact. She says, this is as certain and as obvious as that a stone thrown into a pond will sooner or later set in motion every single drop of water therein. This is as certain as that a stone thrown into a pond will sooner or later set in motion every single drop of water therein. So it is not me only who is affected by the karmic consequences of my actions. Every single person in this room, every single atom in the universe is affected by my thoughts and deeds. They do not just rebound on me by some personal karmic law. There is also an impersonal universal karmic law in place, according to which when a stone is dropped into a pond, it will sooner or later affect every single drop of water in that pond. And of course, we live in a very large pond called manifestation. And everything that we do affects everything. As mentioned at the outset of this talk, I believe that in recent years, the Theosophical Society has somewhat neglected the third object, which deals with the powers latent in the human being, for quite good reason. As soon as you mention the latent powers in man, 1/3 of the audience will stand up and tell you their latest psychic experience, some of which might be very interesting, but from a philosophical point of view could be slightly lacking in substance. But in any case, the very subject of the latent powers in man seems to bring up our latent egotism in some respects. So I think it has not been an unwise move to somewhat underemphasize that. But nevertheless, it is extremely important, because actually sensing the oneness of life is a latent power of the human being, a very, very, very latent power. And we need to make it less latent and more potent if any progress is to be made in the Theosophical Society or in the world. And there is, in fact, a tremendous body of evidence-based research into what are now known as anomalous mental capacities, which in the third object are described as powers latent in the human being. But the politically correct expression now is anomalous mental capacities. Anomalous meaning unusual, strange, inexplicable, shouldn't be there, shouldn't happen mental capacities, but which routinely happen to everyone. There is a large body of evidence-based research into these capacities latent in the human being, research conducted by bona fide scientists and ignored by other bona fide scientists. I have no doubt that HPB would be making significant mileage out of this fact and the implications of the research, one of the most important features of which is that it clearly and unequivocally points towards the existence of non-local consciousness, and also clearly suggests the way to it in a scientific, provable, verifiable sense. The significance of this research and the techniques studied could be summarized in the following remark by Russell Targ, T-A-R-G, in his book on remote viewing. He said, "Our experience with remote viewing, clairvoyance we might say, our experience with remote viewing shows without a doubt that we can learn to expand our unconditioned awareness through all of space and time, to directly explore the timeless existence described by the mystics. Our experience with remote viewing shows without a doubt that we can learn to expand our unconditioned awareness through all of space and time, to directly explore the timeless existence derived by the mystics." He does, in fact, teach you how to remote view in chapter 3 of his book, and I can give you the details of that if you are interested later. So there is much more to our psychic capacities than fortune-telling. Incidentally, Russell Targ is a physicist who worked at Lockheed Missiles and Space, but now teaches remote viewing instead. And when he left his former employ, he made the remark, "I launched myself on a different path to spaciousness that didn't require a missile. I launched myself on a different path to spaciousness that didn't require a missile," and incidentally is far less polluting. The term extrasensory perception, with which most, if not all of you, will be familiar, ESP, was coined in 1934 by a researcher by the name of J.B. Rhine, when in 1934 he published an academic title, Extrasensory Perception, which, much to his surprise, became a bestseller, reaching millions of readers. As an academic publication, he expected to reach about 50 readers, but it became a worldwide bestseller. What is most interesting is the vilification, the hate mail that was generated by the success of this publication, Extrasensory Perception. And this vilification led Rhine to make a most profound observation, that in the history of more than one branch of research, the stone which a hasty science rejected has sometimes become the cornerstone of its later structure. In the history of more than one branch of research, the stone which a hasty science rejected has sometimes become the cornerstone of its later structure. Equally interesting, the father of American psychology, William James, made the following remark when writing about his own conversion to the study of anomalous states, especially those exhibited by mediums in trances. He said, "Science, so far as science denies such exceptional facts, lies prostrate in the dust for me, and the most urgent intellectual need which I feel at present is that science be built up again in a form in which such facts shall have a positive place." Now, I'll read that again because it represents something of a to-do list for the Theosophical Society. Science, so far as science denies such exceptional facts, lies prostrate in the dust for me, and the most urgent intellectual need which I feel at present is that science be built up again in a form in which such facts shall have a positive place. Sadly, many scientists shy away from such facts even now. There was a recent, quite remarkable example of this when Brian Josephson was invited in 2001 by Royal Mail in England to write a few words on the future of physics for the stamp issue in centenary commemoration of the institution of the Nobel Prize. And I think he was asked to write 130 words. One Nobel Prize winner from each category of the Nobel Prize was asked to write 130 words. And this is what Brian Josephson wrote. "Quantum theory is now being fruitfully combined with theories of information and computation. These developments may lead to an explanation of processes still not understood within conventional science, such as telepathy, an area where Britain is at the forefront of research." So this statement went out in 2001 with Royal Mail's issue of stamps in commemoration of the Nobel Prize centenary. "Quantum theory is now being fruitfully combined with theories of information and computation. These developments may lead to an explanation of processes still not understood within conventional science, such as telepathy, an area where Britain is at the forefront of research." Now, that may seem like a fairly harmless statement to you, and a factual one, but Royal Mail received a number of vociferous complaints from other physicists who wished to deny all evidence for the existence of telepathy, some of whom went so far as to say that while Brian Josephson may have been a wonderful Nobel Prize-winning scientist in 1973, since then he has been practicing meditation and it has addled his brain. As Josephson points out, science journals such as Nature and Science blatantly censor the sort of research that we're speaking about today. If a coherent theory with inconvenient or uncomfortable implications can't be disproved in science, then it is generally ignored. So what we tend to find in response to the research into anomalous states or anomalous mental capacities, if the researcher can't be rubbished, then he or she is ignored. Nevertheless, we do have modern Western science, especially in the form of what has long been regarded its epitome, namely physics, affirming that there is indeed something that connects all parts of nature's empire, and affirming that thoughts are things. For example, Henry Stapp, another Nobel Prize-winning physicist, made the following remark: "The new physics presents prima facie evidence that our human thoughts are linked to nature by non-local connections. Our human thoughts are linked to nature by non-local connections. What a person chooses to do in one region seems immediately to affect what is true elsewhere in the universe." This is a physicist speaking from the point of view of science. What a person chooses to do in one region changes immediately what is true elsewhere in the universe. This non-local aspect can be understood by conceiving the universe to be not a collection of tiny bits of matter, but rather a growing compendium of bits of information. The universe is not a collection of bits of matter, but a growing compendium of bits of information. And of course, we are adding to that compendium as we sit here. And I believe that this is Stapp still, and I believe that most quantum physicists will also agree that our conscious thoughts ought eventually to be understood within science. Our conscious thoughts ought eventually to be understood within science, and that when properly understood, our thoughts will be seen to be efficacious. When properly understood, our thoughts will be seen to be efficacious. Now, if that is not a modern version of thoughts are things, or the power of thought, I really don't know what is. So, as members of the Theosophical Society concerned with its welfare, and most importantly, as members of the Theosophical Society concerned with the welfare of the world, we do live in very interesting and potentially very transformative times, socially transformative, that is. However, in conclusion, I might just point out that where there is a real feeling of brotherhood, there is probably no need to speak about it, and that speaking about it probably never brought it about. Instead of universal brotherhood, perhaps TS members could aim a little lower for a while and at least try to be law-abiding citizens, immutable law-abiding citizens, that is, polite, treat people inside and outside the TS with respect, and possibly devote some time each day, or at least each week, to thinking about things afresh. And I'm not even speaking about meditating, but looking at things afresh, once a day or once a week. Sometimes it only takes a second to look at things afresh, and it is surprisingly what a different picture the puzzles on the page come to form. Theosophy may well turn out to be the cornerstone of the future religion, as once predicted, but that may not involve the Theosophical Society in any way. I'm not sure if any of you have considered that possibility. Theosophy may well be the cornerstone of the future religion, but it may not involve the Theosophical Society in any way. For all we know, Theosophy is thriving in the world outside our ranks, in the field of science, in the deep ecology movement, and even in the more enlightened areas of the business world. What is perhaps unique about the Theosophical Society, and this must be protected at all costs and protected from ourselves, is that it is a community of inquirers into divine wisdom and the meaning of life. And here we need to stress both community and inquiry. The price of this freedom that we have given ourselves to inquire into the meaning of life without any doctrines or dogmas on board is eternal vigilance. This is a sign that you find outside Returned Servicemen League's clubs in Australia. The price of freedom is eternal vigilance. And I believe that indeed it is. And of course, the greatest vigilance has to be vigilance of thought. So let us be vigilant against our greatest foe, which is coming to conclusions, even though I am concluding this talk, so present company accepted. Perhaps we should be eternally vigilant against the greatest foe, the foe of conclusion, and perhaps stress the community aspect of our society rather more than has often been the case. Thank you very much.